now to weigh in on all of that is former Speaker of the House and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. He is the author of Beyond Biden. Great to see you, Newt. Thank you so much for being here. Your thoughts on all of this. Can you explain why it is that even as Russia is causing all of this death and destruction, some say genocide, we are still working with Russia as far as having them negotiate on our behalf for the Iran deal, and we just shut off imports 24 hours ago?
Well, look, I think that the Biden administration has no ability to think strategically. So they bounce from press conference to press conference, from a ridiculous statement to ridiculous statement. They don't come to grips with reality. The reality is that Putin is engaged in what are clearly war crimes. These are criminal activities targeting maternity hospitals and children's hospitals, targeting nuclear facilities. The reports I saw this morning are that the Russians are moving towards using chemical weapons exactly as they did in Syria. They're bringing in Chechens to terrorize people. They've sent in the Wagner Group, which is Putin's personal assassination squad, to try to kill some 23 Ukrainian leaders, starting with the president. That is a criminal act by any standard. And nobody in the West wants to come to grips with the fact that you now have a huge country with 6,000 nuclear weapons whose leader is engaging in a series of war crimes and who clearly is extraordinarily dangerous. So they keep dancing around it. But the Iranian agreement is insane. I mean, you have at a time when Russia's invading Ukraine, killing innocent civilians, engaging in clearly criminal acts, the Biden administration is letting the Russians set the tone for negotiating with Iran at a time, by the way, when the leading state power of terrorism in the world, the Iranians, actually have people in the United States trying to hunt down and kill former government officials. And apparently, the Biden administration has avoided indicting two of these people because they don't, I guess they don't want to offend the Iranians. This is literally madness. This is not political. It's not right and left. These are people who are just deranged. They're out of touch with reality.
Newt, they don't want to offend the Iranians, but they're perfectly fine offending the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates. Let's face it, the Iranian-backed Houthis were striking Abu Dhabi as recently as a month ago, and the Biden administration said nothing. And now here's Joe Biden, hat in hand, going to the Saudis, going to the United Arab Emirates, going to Venezuela with hat in hand, trying to get them to pump more oil to get gasoline prices and oil prices down. I was just struck by the story yesterday that the Wall Street Journal broke, that the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates did not take his call. The White House, by the way, is denying that.
Well, I mean, first of all, what you have is a secular religion, which people like John Kerry believe in so passionately that they will do virtually anything. So why would you take oil from Venezuela but not from Texas? Why would you take natural gas from Iran but not from Oklahoma? I mean, there's something so profoundly perverted in the entire thought process of the Biden administration that it doesn't fit any kind of traditional political situation. Second, if you watch Kamala Harris, how could you send her anywhere? I mean, the fact is she is such an example of weakness and ignorance that having her in Poland and Romania weakens, it doesn't strengthen the Western alliance. And nobody's coming to grips with the reality of Putin. Putin is engaged in actions that are clearly war crimes. And he is directing them himself. They're getting worse. He's getting bolder as he gets more desperate. And you had Secretary Blinken doing the right thing the other day, saying that, yes, we would help the Poles deliver MiG-29s to Ukraine. Within a day or two, the Defense Department of the very same administration says, no, we can't do that. Well, I mean, where are we on all this stuff? And frankly, I think we're drifting towards an enormous danger of nuclear war and an enormous danger of a decisive defeat of the West.
And we're not doing anything about it, really, enough. A lot of people say the response has been weak, sanctions on oligarchs. I know that we've sent some equipment, but this debate about whether or not to help in the transfer of jets to Ukraine as Zelensky begs for it, and John Kerry doubles down on his climate agenda. You just hit it spot on, Newt. The fact that the climate czar... Yeah, John Kerry is worried about the climate agenda, even as war rages in Ukraine. Here's John Kerry this week. I got to get your reaction. Watch.
We're already seeing climate refugees around the world. If you think migration has been a problem in Europe from the Syrian war, or even from what we see now, wait till you see 100 million people for whom the entire food production capacity has collapsed.
Mr. Speaker.
Look, you have to start with the idea that John Kerry is totally out of touch with reality, and that it tells you a lot about the Biden administration, that it is filled with people who are out of touch with reality. The fact is the war against Ukraine is going to raise the price of wheat higher than the price of oil. Millions are going to suffer, and millions are probably going to die of starvation because of the Russian attack on Ukraine. The fact is that the shipping, which was already messed up, is now dramatically more messed up because of what's happening in the Black Sea. The fact is that the Turkish economy is cratering because of the effect of the Russians in the Black Sea. And to not understand that this is one of the great crisis points in American history and in world history. I've always wondered if President Roosevelt had picked Henry Wallace and kept him, he's a very left-wing guy who was very pro-Moscow at the time. If he had been the president instead of Harry Truman, what would have happened? And the odds are that the Soviets would have won. Well, we're now getting to see that. This is the equivalent of Henry Wallace in 1945 giving in. And I don't think people realize yet what an enormously dangerous moment we're in. And that this is very close to the late 1930s or to 1914. Putin has nuclear weapons. He is clearly willing to do anything. He has total contempt for the West. And I fully expect him to start using chemical weapons in the next few days because he can't win a conventional war. I think it's been a great shock to him to realize how bad his military is and how courageous the Ukrainians are. Americans need to match the Ukrainians in our willingness to stand up to a dictator.
Even as inflation surges and the American families feel it firsthand, what should this administration be doing now? We're waiting on the CPI number. We're expecting 40-year highs. We've got gasoline at new record highs. And you're talking about the potential for chemical weapons being used by Vladimir Putin. What should the administration's next move be?
Well, the first move ought to be to totally open up American oil and gas production, repeal all of the executive orders and other things that Biden has done to cripple America, and communicate to the Europeans that we will be their primary supplier of natural gas and that we're going to drive down the price of oil to take money out of Putin's pocket. Putin makes over $1 billion a day, every day, out of the current high price of oil. You can talk about sanctions all you want, but as long as oil is this expensive, Putin's going to be able to afford this war forever. Second, I think we have to have a genuine strategy of strengthening Ukraine, giving them every weapon they need, and making sure that they defeat the Russian military. I don't think we can have anything short of an absolute defeat. And third, we ought to start saying openly, Putin ought to be subject to being tried for crimes that are clearly war crimes. They are clearly crimes against civilization. You can't bomb a children's hospital deliberately, or bomb a nuclear reactor, or do the kind of, or send in your assassination squad to try to kill the top people in the Ukrainian government. You can't do those things and get away with it. And if we allow him to get away with it, we have now entered an age of barbarism, and we're going to see this stuff all over the planet. And it's going to be as though the Cold War never existed and the West never won. And it will be Joe Biden who will have presided over the defeat of the West.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder why they're not doing all of that right now. I mean, why not? We saw those pictures of the maternity ward and the hospital bombing yesterday. They can't. Why?
They can't because they believe in a secular religion which makes it they can't deal with violent criminals at home. They can't deal with a violent dictator overseas. They can't confront reality. They get together in a room and tell themselves fantasies. I mean, if you just watch Kamala Harris trying to explain the war, it should be obvious these people are incompetent to deal with the real world. They were fine in a basement for a campaign. They're just terrible in the White House for a real war.
Newt, it's great to see you. As always, thanks very much for your insights.
Good to see you.
Former Speaker of the House,
tragic times.
Speaker Newt Gingrich. They sure are.